Hello and welcome to the Sweetwagon Academy. This is a continuation to the Intro to Advanced Reaper video I released a few weeks back, and today we're going to delve into a somewhat niche strategy to maximize your damage output on Reaper in high-end content. Bear in mind this is an optimization tool and is never required for clearing any content in the game. It is, however, my personal philosophy that no matter what else is going on in the party, I will always do whatever I can to maximize the amount of damage I bring to the table, as my primary role is a melee DPS. That's kind of what I do. It's therefore in my best interest to have as many extra tools at my disposal to be able to help my team and do the most amount of damage I possibly can to help ensure the clear, and the best way to do that is to be able to do more damage to the boss. It's simple as that. So in this video we're going to take a look at an alternative 2-minute burst for Reaper, and it is one that I have not really seen floating around that much when discussing the many ins and outs of the job. So I hope I'm able to shed some light on this and help more people creatively explore Reaper, something that I feel is kind of missing right now. Everyone just does the normal Double Enshroud and then that's it. That's all the optimization you have. That's not really the case, as I hope to show you here. So to start things off, we will just quickly summarize what the normal 2-minute burst looks like, the so-called Double Enshroud. We enter Enshroud with about 7 seconds left of Arcane Circle, use one Shadow of Death, any Void or Cross Reaping skill, then another Shadow of Death. In the weave slot immediately after the second Shadow of Death, we want to pot if it is available, and then late weave Arcane Circle. Finish up the rest of the Enshroud window, and then immediately use Plentiful Harvest. Go straight into your second Enshroud and finish up the window as usual. Because the Double Enshroud takes so long to perform, if you had an active combo going into the burst window, you will need to finish it immediately after coming out, otherwise the combo is going to drop, which is a huge damage loss over time. When you do this during the very first 2-minute window of any encounter, you may have noticed that Gluttony actually comes off cooldown right around the time you use Arcane Circle. But we let it sit there for roughly 20 seconds, completely unused, while we do our back-to-back Double Enshrouds. After the second Enshroud, we sometimes have to continue the melee combo, which further pushes Gluttony back, and only then are we able to actually use it, but at that point it's sat there completely unused for 20-something seconds. Now this is the meta burst window for Reaper, and it is so for good reason. This is how you put as much potency into a given burst window as possible, which is really important what with raid buff stacking multiplicatively and all of that fun stuff. The more damage we can put into burst, the better. Or is it? Gluttony is a very special cooldown in that it both allows us to use Executioner's Gibbet and Gallows, which deals a lot of damage, but each single use, provided it is followed up with Gibbet and Gallows, nets us 40% of the way towards a new Enshroud window, and considering each Enshroud window packs a significant punch, if you are able to squeeze out one whole extra use of Enshroud over the course of a fight, that is going to end up netting you more damage than it would lose you with doing this alternative burst. So enough beating around the bush, let's jump into it and take a look at what I have called Gluttony Burst, but it doesn't really have a name, mostly because I don't see it around enough, and I'm not very creative when it comes to names, so bear with me on this one. If you come up with a good name, just call it whatever you want. I call it the Gluttony Burst. Here we go. So here we are, roughly 15 seconds before Arcane Circle comes off cooldown, and you may already see something a bit funny. I am sitting on 100 Shroud Gauge and at least 50 Soul Gauge, and this is really important. To be able to do the Gluttony Burst properly, we need to enter the burst window with at least 50 Soul Gauge, because we are looking to pull off a Gluttony in between the two Enshroud bursts. But because Soul Slice is a weak GCD, we want to avoid using that in burst, therefore we need to prep a little bit more. The 100 Shroud Gauge is a direct result of this, as if you were to pull off an Enshroud between the opener and the 2-minute window, you don't actually have enough time to rebuild both the 50 Soul Gauge for Gluttony as well as the 50 Shroud Gauge for the next Double Enshroud. So let's move on and see things in action. I have of course slowed down the clip to help visualize the whole window, and I will show it in real time once we are done with the basics. When Arcane Circle has roughly 10 to 11 seconds left, we enter our first Enshroud and immediately use Shadow of Death to refresh the timer. You follow this up with any Void or Cross Reaping skill and weave in a pot. Continue with the alternating Reapings and Lemure Shroud, but make sure you do not use Sacrificium just yet. When you're down to your last stack, reapply Shadow of Death, weave in Arcane Circle, and now use Sacrificium. Finish it up with a Communio cast, and then immediately weave in Gluttony and land the 2 Executioner skills, Gibbet and Gallows, in whichever order is necessary. Use Plentiful Harvest, and then immediately re-enter Shroud and finish up the rest of this window as you normally would. Void Cross, Reapings, Lemure Shrouds, Sacrificium, finish it up with a Communio cast, and finally Perfection. If you did this right, the Perfectio should land just as Arcane Circle wears off. It looks very, very tight. This does not really allow for any clipping, but it does work. Because you potted when you did before in the first Enshroud window, you still have the pot active for a couple of seconds after the Perfectio lands, so just try to get whatever else you can in there. Soul Slice into Bloodstock and Gibbet or Gallows, whatever. You won't have too much room, just land something that isn't just a basic GCD if possible. And that is it, that is the Gluttony Burst. So all you're really doing is you're shifting your Gluttony forward to, instead of letting it sit unused for 20 seconds, you're using it in the middle of your burst window, which makes sure that it stays on the 1 minute cooldown, which depending on the kill time, could let you use it one whole extra time over the course of the fight, which in the certain event of a specific kill time or the boss becoming untargetable or something like that, will net you an extra use either of Gluttony in one of like a medium case scenario, and best case scenario it lets you use an extra Gluttony and a whole extra Communio that you would not normally get, just because you get that 20 extra Shroud gauge that you get from using a Communio. Now it's not like a one-to-one, this is always going to increase the amount of damage you do in a given fight. This is fight specific. It needs some experimentation, it needs some fiddling around with to be able to tell when it is correct. For some recent examples as to when this is actually applicable, during M4, when the phase transition into phase 2 happens, if you don't do this, you end up not using your Gluttony at all until the boss becomes targetable again after the whole second phase and the big stompy raid Y that happens. Which, you know, that's obviously not great. That's like 40 seconds that you're not using Gluttony. On a similar note, in M7 of the current raid tier, as you can see in the clip behind me right here, at the end of the first phase, the boss knocks you over onto a second platform, during which he becomes untargetable and you can't obviously do any moves, you can't even use Gluttony just to put it on cooldown because you need a target. So here I'm actually doing the Gluttony Burst, just to make sure that I get my Gluttony off before the boss becomes untargetable, just to make sure that I have it constantly ticking on cooldown, to make sure that I get an extra use out of it later down the line. Gluttony here is on cooldown. I'm doing the rest of my burst as normal. You can see that I still have my buffs open, and I'm about to do Communio into Perfectio, which still all lands well within the buffs, and I'm able to safely land on the second platform with Gluttony on cooldown, which is just net gain completely. Right now it's free damage. So let's actually go through it, this time at full speed. Remember, you need 50 soul gauge to be able to use Gluttony in the middle of the burst, and you need 50 shroud gauge to actually do the double enshroud as usual. At -10 we enter our enshroud and immediately Shadow of Death. Void or cross reaping and immediately pot. You want to land 3 more reaping skills and the 2 lemures that you get as weaves. Then following it up with a second Shadow of Death, weave in Arcane Circle and Sacrificium, Communio, and immediately weave in Gluttony, land Executioner's Gibbet and Gallows. Follow it up with a Plentiful Harvest and immediately go back into Enshroud, executing this as normal, Sacrificium, Void Cross Lemure, Void Cross Lemure, finish it up with a Communio into Perfectio. You still have your pot running a little bit after that, so just make sure you land a couple of strong GCDs, preferably something like Soul Slice, Bloodstock, Gibbet or Gallows. Try to avoid reapplying Shadow of Death or restarting your melee combo. Wait until your pot has worn off. Congratulations, that's it. That is the Gluttony Burst at full speed. If you are used to the Double Enshroud, which why wouldn't you be if you're playing Reaper, but this is a very different experience. You are going to mess it up. You are going to muscle memory your way into using an Enshroud during the 1 minute, which is going to screw things up for you. You are going to drift your Gluttony. This is very, very important. You are, at some point, going to drift your Gluttony, and that is going to break this. That means you can no longer do this burst window. If you drift your Gluttony 1 whole GCD, that means you now need to delay your whole burst window with 1 GCD, otherwise Gluttony is not going to be available at the moment you need it to be available in the middle of the burst. I'm gonna say it again. If you drift your Gluttony a single GCD, you also need to drift your whole burst window by a single GCD, which means your burst is going to be misaligned. Don't do this. If you drift your Gluttony, just go back to doing a normal Double Enshroud. You can always default back to just doing a normal Double Enshroud. Just let Gluttony sit there for the 20 seconds. It doesn't matter if you do it now or if you did it in the first 2-minute burst at the beginning of the fight. The end result is going to be the same. It's going to be fine. Just have that as like your plan B. For many of the fights where I personally use this Gluttony Burst, I only use it for the very first or maybe the second 2-minute burst. Like in M7, I only use it at the very beginning. After that, there's no point. I have Gluttony on cooldown at the end of the 2 minutes. That is all I wanted out of the fight. For the rest of the fight, it's fine. I can go back to doing normal Double Enshroud. Don't lock yourself into doing this. This is trickier and it requires you to absolutely not drift Gluttony, which is very, very, very hard to do over the course of a long fight. So just add this as another tool in your ever-expanding toolbox at being better at the game and use it when you think it works. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any ideas for how to do things differently, or if you want advice on a specific fight, I usually try to push things pretty far when I optimize my own gameplay, whether it be this sort of thing where you're shifting your 2-minute bursts around or something like that, when you're holding on to your harvest moons for a specific counter, for a specific point in an encounter, using what's it called, ingress and egress very, very aggressively. I just love that sort of thing. It's my absolute favorite thing to do in this game. So if you have any questions, comments, ideas, thoughts like that, don't forget to leave a comment down below. I will try to answer everything to the best of my ability. Thank you very much for watching.